Welcome today for Resume Strategies at Work. My name is Cindy Cornell, and I am the career coach for working professionals at the Yale School of Management. What are we going to talk about today? How do we get through to people that we want to be excited about our resume as we're in job search? So many people I talk to say, I've finally gotten my resume just the way I want it, but I'm just not getting interviews. This sounds like you're in the right place and you're not alone. We're going to actually spend some time doing a few things. We're going to debunk some common myths. We are going to talk about strategy overarching, and we're going to talk about some best practices. So let's get into that. But first, let me ask you please to focus on our time together today. And if you do have questions, you can ask them through the Q&A function. And do please reach out to me for personal coaching if that would be useful to you. I know I've seen in the attendees quite a number of people that I've had conversations with in the past, and a few people that I've talked to even as early as or as recently as this morning. So looking forward to continuing those conversations as well. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available after the session. And I do know that some of you will have questions and might have things in chat as well. I can't look at both presenting and chatting, so I might occasionally peek over and see what's going on if there's any activity so that I can be focused on the content. So diving into the content itself and the agenda, again, we're going to kind of go through overview and then some myths, and then really get into best practices to creating some really powerful resumes. I'm building on ideas that you might have heard in some of the prior career webinars. We've done a lot this year during our socially distanced programming, and you can find all of those on the careers tab of the alumni portal. If you do visit the alumni portal, it might look a little different than it has in the past. I promise you all the information's still there. It just takes a couple more clicks to get there. You'll find them under general career support, which you'll find underneath the career page, and then under your career, and then under career resources. It's all there though. So let's dive in. Right now we're talking about tailored resumes, and that's kind of in the middle of a job search strategy. So I want you just to be clear about what might have happened before we got to this stage and what would happen after this stage. It's not the first step in a job search. We will have done been thoughtful. Last month we talked about clarifying our offer. What do we want to do? We found a potentially well-aligned opportunity. We've done some research to figure out if it's a company that we think we'd be well suited for. And now we're getting ready to really put our best foot forward in the application. There's going to be some time afterwards as well, where we're going to be being thoughtful about if what we're hearing from them is truly aligned with what we thought the opportunity would be. So just because you actually apply for a job, I don't want you to get so excited that this is the job for you, because I do want that to be a part of a mutually attractive process that you have a say in as well. So we're getting ready. I also want to kind of put a watch out there for you up at the top, that to put together a really thoughtful, tailored resume takes a fair amount of work. So what I'm going to describe to you isn't something that we're going to just kind of put together in 5 minutes and shoot out the door. Make sure that this is something that you really think that you want before you apply. So you will have had some kind of screening methodologies to figure out if it's aligned with your objectives. And I want to make sure that you're focusing your energy on what you would consider to be high value opportunities. Being rejected for things that you wouldn't ultimately be happy for, or happy in, is not helpful to the ego in a job search process. And it's often a really significant energy drain. So again, I don't want you to settle, even in a time when there might be economic disruption. There still is hiring happening. I'm having conversations with people about negotiations of salary and things like that. So I want you to be, kind of optimistic in your process, because that energy is really helpful to bringing in the right type of opportunities and giving you the best foot forward in an interview when you get to that space. One seat is all it takes. If you think about this particular dandelion and throwing the resume or the seeds out to the wind, You don't kind of know where they've landed, and it's hard for you to cultivate them. Anyone who's actually done any gardening knows that if you want something to grow, you kind of nurture the soil, you're thoughtful about where you plant it, how spaced out plantings might be, et cetera. So I do want you to kind of think about how you want to, kind of plant your seeds. You get one chance to make a first impression. And sending this large number of similar or the same resume to different opportunities could feel like it's the way to go because you're busy, you're in action. It's not going to help you, though, to get somebody's attention and keep it. And that's super important. You're not going to get the call or be able to take a next step. So all of this activity doesn't generally lead to the types of next steps and opportunities you're looking for. The people you're talking to are looking for a solution to a specific problem. That you have a seed or a resume may not be the solution to what they're seeking. So not the best way to make it to the top of their pile. We're looking for one bullseye. In this particular instance, it's a different view of the seeds, if you will, where you're shooting lots and lots of arrows at the same time. We don't know what we're shooting for. I'm remembering some years ago when I was with my son at one of his summer camps, and a couple of the kids were, kind of just learning archery. And I asked, one of the boys, what were they shooting for? And they were like, just anything that they could hit. That's not really how I want to play this. It's not just about shooting arrows. And if you've ever done archery, you know that to shoot this many arrows takes a lot of effort, and you're going to get calloused and it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's way easier to aim strategically and get a couple of arrows hitting much more squarely into a target that you think would be really great for you. So this is our strategy. This is our overview. This is our goal. And if you do shoot straight and thoughtfully, you're going to have more than one opportunity to consider when it gets time for choosing what your next job is, where you're going to share your skills and your knowledge and intelligence next. So that's it for strategy. I want to kind of go in and debunk some myths right now. So hopefully this is useful to you so far, and hopefully this helps as well. So will a reader take the time to understand and interpret what you've done in other jobs, companies, industries, and how that experience sets you up for success in their company? Probably not. They're not going to take the time. I don't know about you. I'm kind of busy. There's a lot going on as we are kind of living and working at home with our families during a global pandemic. To take the time to really figure out what did they do and does that make sense? And it's probably not going to happen. So again, if you get a big pile of resumes, you want yours to be at the top of the pile. If it's not clear to them at the outset, it's not going to make it there. So I want you to create a clear context. This is true even if we're making a job pivot or a switch. And I've been sharing a lot of things about job pivots on LinkedIn. So if you haven't checked out or if you haven't connected with me there, there's plenty of content there. And I'm also happy to talk to you about articulating your own clear pivot and language around that in a personal coaching session. So that's an opportunity for you as well. It's up to you to create that context. And it's also really important, if you want a particular role, yet you've labeled yourself historically as all of the things that you've done in the past, it's not making it easy for them to make that connection to say, oh, this person is for that role. So really, it's not about them figuring it out. It's about you presenting it to them in a way that makes it easy. Next question. If you include everything you've ever done, the interview will pick and choose the things they care about. Again, same kind of reason, false. It's too much information. It's not tailored to what they're looking for. You are not presenting yourself as the solution to their specific problem. I want you to think about the resume as being something that's shared very succinctly and specifically and generously in their language, so that they're super excited to meet you, because that's really the next step, right? They receive a resume in the mail or email or from a colleague, and they peek at it, they look at the top, oh, this looks interesting. Oh, and they're reading a little more. Oh, I want to hear some of these stories. So including everything and not having translated it into their language, again, not going to get you to the top of the pile. Here's another one for you. It's important to capture the reader's attention quickly and keep it by sharing relevant experience of your relevant evidence of your prior experience and success through resonant stories and language. Trick question. This one's true. So I want you to kind of think about the things that I just shared. Oh, sorry, here, there we go, true. And how they think about it, and be thoughtful to make sure that even if you called it something different in your other company, it's not about being loyal to that other company in that other language. It's about really sharing it in a way that they're going to like it. For those of you who might have worked internationally, if you talk about turnover here in the United States, oftentimes it refers to people. If you talk about turnover in the UK, they're talking about revenue. So you really want to make sure that you're speaking in a way that they're going to be excited about it. I'm going to shift over to job descriptions, because typically we're sending a resume based on a job description. Everything on a job description is required. False. Not all items on a job description are actually required. I want you to start to think about why they might have asked for it, and what they suppose people with that kind of experience know how to do. Right? Really putting a bunch of things on a resume or on a job description is really about mitigating a risk and making sure that people can actually achieve an intended outcome. So taking the time to figure out what is the outcome and how might that experience be beneficial to being successful in that outcome, super important. So unpacking it, and we'll talk more about unpacking job descriptions in our career webinar next month. Unpacking it and really understanding those things is going to be helpful for you potentially to make your case as being a non-traditional candidate. Here's another one for you. Job descriptions outline all the skills and outcomes required to be successful for the role in question. Again, this is another false. Don't not apply because you don't tick every box. And on the other side, it's a kind of a fictional ideal for some of those folks when they do say, oh my gosh, here's this giant list. Very few people would have all of those things. If you read some job descriptions carefully, they often say, or relevant experience. So much of what a company needs is in fact specific to that company and to its unique challenges. They're looking for people that might be able to take different prior experiences together to accomplish those challenges in this new company. So they don't necessarily outline everything. And if you don't have everything, it's not necessarily a reason not to apply either. What stories could you show that would help them to understand that you have great potential to shine in their role? So really understanding what they're looking for and why they're looking for it is really important. So let's see, I've got one more of these myths to go through. Job descriptions, true or false? They're always written thoughtfully by people who've actually done the work and understand the roles. Again, this is a false. And kind of a corollary to the last one, many role descriptions really do include everything in the kitchen sink. So really understanding what's important and what might be more ancillary, or what might be something that you can figure out when you get there, or what might be something that had been important at one time and maybe isn't necessarily. Or even in my role at Yale, my job description, it includes things that happen at my level in other departments across the university, but some things that don't even happen within my particular role. But it's included from an HR perspective because other people would be doing those things at my level, and that might give me an understanding of other skills I might need if I wanted to move around into different jobs. So there's a reason for it. It doesn't necessarily relate to how you're going to present yourself in your resume. So we'll shift around to one more true and false question, and I'll give you the answer to this one. If you find a job that you're excited about, do you want to hurry up or do you want to wait? And the answer is, false, not to hurry up, rather true, wait. best thing you can do as soon as you see his job description that sounds good is to do a little bit of research. Figure out, again, what you're looking for and who you're talking to. So please don't rush to say, oh, I have to get it out by Tuesday. I have to be the first person to get it in there. I'd rather you be the 10th person or the 15th person and have a really amazing resume that shines, where they see that you have what they need and they're immediately intrigued when they look at it. I'll give you some more examples of this a little bit later. So coming back into this idea is, when you see the job, the role that you're excited about, unpack it. We'll talk again, like I said, more about that next month. If there is no real job description and you're maybe just talking to somebody about a potential role, write it out. And if there is a job description that's not terribly clear, take the time to write that out too. I'm not looking at going down a job description and kind of making tick marks on it. Yep, I do that, I can do that, I can do that. Really looking at it and saying, what is required here? What skills am I going to use on a daily basis to do this? What does a Tuesday afternoon or a Thursday lunchtime look like? What will I have done throughout the week up to this point as I reflect back on it? If I think about this time, at the end of the year, what will I have accomplished? Jot those things down, and the skills that you have that you can leverage from your prior experiences that are going to set you up to be successful in that role. It takes a little bit of time to do this, and it's going to yield a much, much more resonant result when you finally do share it. Some of you might be new to the career webinar, so I just want to kind of give you an idea of some of the other things that you can look at in terms of resources that I've already shared. I did mention that next month is going to be our webinar about unpacking job descriptions. Before you get to that though, you might want to peek at last month, which was clarifying your offer, making sure that you're really looking at what you want to do and you're beginning to present that in your branding through LinkedIn and in general by your resume, so that you're setting yourself up to apply to those types of roles that you're really, really excited about. In August, I talked about job targeting and kind of a 3-point plan to that, which is pulling together maybe some of the ideas that you would have heard in some earlier webinars that were about powerful storytelling and the hidden job market and where to find jobs. It's not always where you've looked in the past. And just backing up almost to the beginning when we were talking about reimagining our career in 2020. And in fact, you can reimagine your career in 2021 and 2025 and 2030 as well. So some of the skills that we talked about there, important for 2020, and hopefully things that you can carry forward to other throughout your career as part of your general career management. And then also just networking. That was our very first pandemic webinar, if you will, talking about networking in the age of social distancing. So how do you get more information about opportunities, and how do you even start a conversation with somebody that might be a brand new contact? So lots of research that you can do, lots of exploration you can do on your own, and then come back and we can have a different kind of a conversation via coaching, or you can just dive right in and take those webinars right into your job search and your overarching career management strategy. When I speak to anybody who's preparing for a job or prepping for an interview, I start with the last question on this page. Do you really want this job? And sometimes people pause at that and they're like, wow, that's a really, I'm not sure that that's my ideal job. And that's really important to talk about, because sometimes you might still want to go for that job. It highlights some things that you can do though to maybe negotiate it into something that you would be more excited about. So moving forward, I mentioned a few minutes ago that translation is critical. When you're preparing a resume, you have to focus on what they care about. You're solving a problem in their organization. They're trying to figure out if you're going to fit in with their team. And there's some, kind of very clear business outcomes that they're seeking. And there might be even some outcomes that they're uncertain of, and they're looking for someone like you to help them to architect through and beyond this current disruption, or moving into certain new markets, or thinking about through the pandemic and the social disruption and the economic disruption that's happened, how are we going to compete differently on the other side? So lots of things that they care about. And again, you have to kind of think about, who am I talking to, so that you can present it in a way that they're going to say, yes, that's what I'm looking for. And they're leaning in and excited to learn more. In terms of what you care about, and again, in the traditional methods, it's, I got a resume, I'm ready to send it out, let's go. So again, that's really what you've done. It's more of a tombstone in many cases than something that might be more engaging. The metaphor I use often is tombstone versus eulogy. And many resumes, when I first get them, or even LinkedIn profiles, are just lists of things you've done in the past, with filled with responsible fors and managed, and I'm not really clear about what you did and if you did it well. It's not up to them to do this translation. It's up to you to do this translation. You need to do the work showing your experience in ways that they're going to be excited about. And if you don't, it's going to be a long process for you in terms of finding a role that you're really happy in. And I don't wish that on you. So hopefully you're excited to perhaps try some of these best practices, in spite of the fact that it does take a lot longer than doing it the old way. You are not a one-trick wonder. You can use these same, and some of you might recognize this particular slide from an earlier webinar. You can use these same ingredients to make a whole bunch of different things by adding different things or putting them together in different combinations. If you don't show people what you're capable of in terms of what they're looking for, you are going to put yourself into a mold that says, I've in the past been a communications director, for example. If you're labeling yourself as that and talking only about those types of things instead of the component skills you employed every day in doing that job really well, you're not translating and sharing with them the fact that you indeed can craft something and create something new. So many of us want to take those skills and experiences we've had and to transform and to move up into something new. Some people call it switching. Some people call it pivoting. Again, it's up to us to really believe and understand that we have the skills to do those new things, to do the research, to understand the businesses, how they articulate them, what's important to the companies, how they measure success, et cetera. Even if you perhaps can't get the details on the company that you're looking at, you could look at companies in the industry that are outside of that particular space. Lots of ways for you to understand. And sometimes it's as simple as taking a quick course on Coursera or even LinkedIn Learning or edX to learn the language and understand the idiosyncrasies of how a different company or industry might articulate something. That helps you to expand your repertoire out of what you've done into the believable what you'd like to do and why you're already set to do that. The quality of all of the ingredients is important. Not all are one-for-one substitutes. So you do want to be very clear specifically about what you bring in, the level of complexity, for example, that you've been involved with in the past. The stories, and we'll talk about stories in just a little bit, are what you use to convey these things. The stories are about how you moved through challenges and how you solved things and delivered outcomes with people, through teams as leaders, et cetera. So again, we want to give the person who's reading your resume a really good feeling that you are able to identify and mitigate risks, for example, increasing the likelihood that you'd be successful in whatever circumstances might be present for them. Keeping with the food metaphor, The traditional way of resume writing is everything, buffet. My way is a tailored presentation. What I want to tell you about that, and this happened again, as I said once before in a prior webinar, when things like that happen, I encourage you to try to move through it as gracefully as you can, because sometimes in this world, technology works and sometimes it doesn't. So if you allow yourself to be flummoxed when those types of things happen, you're not going to create the great impression that you want to make. And it really is incredibly important for people to see that, especially in leadership roles, that you're able to move forward and really present and deal with things that might not work in exactly the way you want them to on a daily basis. So back to this page, what's on the menu? Everything or nothing. We don't want to show them things they don't want. We want to show them the things that they'd be hungry for, not the things that they might find unappetizing. Or I don't know if you've ever been to a buffet and you've just been so overwhelmed by what's there. Or, you know, in this world right now, when we're working through a pandemic, we probably don't even want to eat at a buffet because there's just too much and other people maybe have been touching it. So think about the place setting, think about the way you talk about things, and is it aligned with how that company might be thinking about things. I'm just opening up the Q&A. I think, Kayla, you had handled the Q&A that had popped in before. If there's anything that I missed, you'll let me know in a little bit. And I'm just getting everything back here open so I can see what we've got going on. Okay, so next slide is moving into a different space. I mentioned I was going to tell you about the stories. Your resume sets you up to tell stories, and this is really important and I think game-changing for a lot of people when they think about a resume. You walk in, you might feel anxious, you really want this job, and you don't know what they're going to ask you. It could go anywhere. Well, if you're really thoughtful about how you put your resume together, that's not exactly true. Your resume is going to set up the stories. So in this particular instance, this person is about to go in for an interview and they might be thinking about how they presented things present to this particular opportunity in front of us. What is this organization? What's the hiring manager? What are the business partners I might be working with? What do they want to hear about? What are the things that they're excited for? When you're waiting, you get to mentally rehearse. What are they going to ask about? Well, if you're smart, they're going to ask about the things that you wrote about in your resume, because those things are like little movie previews, that little story previews that they lean into and say, I'd like to hear more about it. It's kind of like when we used to read newspapers and we'd look at headlines. We don't read the whole paper. We scan for headlines. And this happens to some extent on social media as well. We choose those things that we're attracted to and we go deeper into those things. So are you highlighting the things that you want to talk about and that they're going to be most excited about? And have you gone back and thought about those experiences and the details associated with them so that you can share the story in a way that the person you're talking to can participate in the story with you? Again, we're not talking about telling stories with a strict historical view. Another metaphor that I can sometimes use is an actor or a sports player. If you know how to play baseball or basketball, or pick your favorite sport, or if you're a phenomenal actor, you're not limited to being successful on just that one stage with just that one troupe in just that one, doing just that one particular play or script, or on one field with one team in one position. You can maybe, if you're a good athlete, play a bunch of different positions, and understanding the rules of the game, you can play with a couple of different teams. This is kind of what you want to think about in terms of how you're going to tell your stories, because you'd like the person that you're talking to be in the story with you. So your resume, if you think about it this way, is a sizzle reel of your very best clips. and you've curated it for this particular audience. When I go to the movies, or in the days when I went to the theater, now it's more looking online and seeing what's available on Amazon or Hulu. When I would look at what was available and consider it with friends or family, we're looking at it, everybody wants something a little bit different. This is why we're tailoring the resume, because everybody does want something a little bit different. Everyone is looking for a story in a slightly different way. And you want to make sure that what you're presenting for this particular audience is going to be stuff that they're really excited by. Think about the last time you were in a theater and you're like, yes, I want that. I'm marking it down in my calendar. I want to see it on opening weekend. So the boring way to say it is kind of the IMDb way. It's a summary sentence describing what happens in the movie and who played in it, and if they had a speaking part, and what genre it fits into, but it doesn't get you into the story. The sizzle reel side is really about thinking about that appropriate audience where they're leaning in and they can't wait to learn more. So when you're going into the resume or into the interview, what the questions are that they're going to ask with some pretty good degree of certainty. You want to show them to convince them, not tell them. This example on the left is one that I see all the time. Seasoned executive responsible for blah, blah, blah. What's your energy like after reading that? It might sound smart and it might be true. It's not engaging though. So what could it look like? What could you show people? What could you engage people with? There's so many different things you could include here. You might think about also checking out some of the career resources and the SAR framework, for example, where you're diving in and really thinking about accomplishment statements that your audience is going to be excited by. Consider what they care about, what the impacts are that they're looking for in this particular role. And again, you might not have done it exactly in your old role. You need to show them the component pieces though, taken apart and shared in a different way, that you do know how to do all of the things that they will need you to do. Going to get into some form questions now. Form is important. Content is more important. Some folks I know hire fancy resume writers that have graphs and different fonts and things are organized in different ways. I want you to be careful with that, especially if you're going to be applying to things online, because when they ask you to kind of submit your resume or scan it in, oftentimes they have a system, technology that's reading it and trying to kind of figure out what your information is so that they can put it into whatever their sorting software is. If it's too fancy, it might not put things in the right places. So the form that we use is pretty consistent with what the students are using, with one major exception. And what that is that the education, if you're an experienced professional, is down low, not up high. Trust me, if you have the right summary statement, the right context, and you have, kind of engaged with people, especially if you've networked into an opportunity, they are going to be very excited to get to know you, and they will scroll down and check out where you went to school. So you will get to see Yale kind of right at the top, or that will be part of their calculus. The summary statement is going to create context for folks, especially if you're trying to pivot. And if you can't read it, it's kind of small here. This is 50 words, which is about the right length for a summary statement. Often, seasoned professionals seek to leverage their previous skills uniquely in a new role or industry. A summary statement is an effective way to create context for the reader, highlighting briefly, in 50 words or fewer, the intersection of prior experience and success with future goals and desired impact. So again, think about this. Your summary statement is not, here's all the stuff I did. It's really focused on where you want to go. And if you have a summary statement that's aligned with their organization and the role you're talking about, you're golden, and they're going to keep reading. Your experience is first, as I mentioned, relevant experience. It's not everything you've ever done. We talked about this earlier in debunking some of the myths. It's things that they're going to care about. So this is why I might write in a resume, it is relevant experience, not professional experience, because there might be a whole bunch of things that you used to do that you don't want to do anymore. I, for example, am a recovered accountant, undergrad accounting. My MBA from Stern was in finance and marketing. There's a whole bunch of things I don't want to do anymore. I was good at them. I got paid well for doing them. They didn't give me joy, and I'd like not to do them in the future. So in that regard, there's things that I'll refer to, and it's quite useful when I talk to and coach people that are in financial roles or in medical roles to know that I've done consulting in the past in healthcare, or that I spent time, kind of in upper level financial management and leadership in companies. Useful. It's not relevant specifically to the task at hand. It's other experience that I also leverage contextually in how I do my job. So that's really important. And I mentioned before, accomplishment statements, thinking about situation, action, result. These types of bullet point statements really give the reader an opportunity to understand how you think and what it might be like to work with you. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor. You can find this template again in the career resources, and in a few minutes I'll show you kind of exactly where to find it. So kind of wrapping up here in best practices, and do please think about questions you want to ask. I see just one is popped into the chat, but if you do have other questions you want to specifically speak about in the time that we have remaining today, I'm happy to talk with you about them. I want you to, at the end of and before you send your resume, oh, I got it, I've tailored it, pause again and take a walk in their shoes. Even think about applying your own high standards to your application. What has attracted you to candidates in the past? What have you been excited about when you've looked at somebody's candidacy? And what have you said yes to? I would also argue that this isn't the place to just wrap up. This is the place to start as well. So as you see the opportunity, again, you're thinking about these questions up front, and then you can come back and you can revisit them if you've made your documentations about the role at the end to say, have I in fact met these goals? If I were to step back and say, what are the 3 things I would want somebody to remember about me after having read the resume that might inspire them to reach out and say, let's have another conversation or a further conversation, deepening our relationship and the investment that they have in knowing us? What are the 3 things I want them to know? And I'll tell you, I've asked this question of people when they pop in and they say, hey, I have a resume. Would you like me to would you review it and tell me what you think of it? Before I even look at it, what do you want me to take away from having read your resume? What 3 or 5 words? And they'll think for a moment and they'll tell me, and I'll say, okay, where are those words or themes coming through in the resume as you've delivered it to me? And oftentimes they're not there. So again, thinking about your goal in terms of an outcome and how you've laid it out, how you've communicated. Again, as leaders, communication is so important to any of us in our success in business. If you haven't communicated that clearly in the resume, you're kind of showing them that you're not the best communicator, at least in the written style, as a first impression. So again, pausing and being intentional and double checking and refining is a best practice. So that is wrapping up, kind of the big ideas I have to share with you today. Key takeaways. Hopefully you remember that the resume is for them. And there's a lot of ways for you to figure out who they are and what they're about so that you can tailor it appropriately. If you don't have an answer, just know that you don't have it yet. not that it's not available. I want you to assume that it almost always is. Just might take a little bit more digging. I don't want you, as I talked about all of this research, to hold back and think it has to be absolutely perfect. Again, timeliness is important. And if you, again, rush it and it's not tailored, it's not going to land, and any of the effort might have been wasted. So checking in now, I'm hopeful that you found this useful to this point. And I did promise you some wrap-up comments and resources. So here's a glimpse at what the newly reformatted career resources look like. You go to the alumni portal, and you then click on the career page, and then you can get down under your career, and you'll see two things under there: career coaching and then career resources. And under career resources, most of the resources that I think you're going to find most useful, relevant to today's webinar, are under general career support. There's information on resumes and cover letters. There's a wonderful course on LinkedIn. I didn't really mention that today, though I will tell you, anytime a hiring manager gets a resume, they're going to check you out on LinkedIn also. So you're going to want to make sure that the content and dates, for example, that you have on one match up with the other, because if they don't, that's going to cause question and potentially some credibility issue with you. And then also the CDO recorded programming and webinars is in under that general career support item as well. And I also encourage you to look ahead to next month when we get back together again. And all of these events are located on the alumni site as well, which is how you got here today, most of you, for the first time. So in terms of questions, I'm hopeful that we've accomplished some of our goals today in terms of giving you a framework and a strategy for thinking about creating a webinar or a resume that's different from maybe what you've done in the past. And there's a couple of things that maybe you would have done that you're not going to do now because you understand why they don't work as well as you thought they might. And you have some ideas about what you're going to try instead. So let me peek here at what we have in terms of questions, and also there's a little bit in the chat as well. So do you need a summary statement if you have a cover letter? I would say absolutely yes, because cover letters don't often or always travel with the resume. If you send it to an HR person, for example, they may not forward that to some of the people that might be on an interview schedule, for example. So I would include anything that you want to be read, I would want to be in the actual resume. The other thing I'll say is that, sometimes people create these really thoughtful cover letters, which really are the stories that you want to be telling in the interview. So if you tell the story in the cover letter, making a really long cover letter, you miss the opportunity to kind of engage with them and have them ask you a lot of questions about that when you actually meet them in person. So again, think about that, giving them a taste, but not telling them the whole thing. They want to be curious, because it's not just one thing that they're going to be hiring you for. So please, let's make sure that the resume can always stand alone. Let's see, what else do we have in here? What's the difference between this resume and a board resume? Again, you're going to want to think about if you're looking for a board of directors role, for example, you're going to want to think about what specifically does that board need? Are you being considered for certain types of subcommittees? So it's going to potentially highlight different things. So again, it's taking the time to unpack what is this opportunity, and there might not be a job description so clearly as there might be for a regular role. Again, it's being thoughtful about showing that you have the credibility and the responsibility and the experience to be able to make guiding recommendations and choices relative to that board opportunity that you're thinking about. Kayla has again been very good in terms of sharing the links to the career resources. And again, coaching, somebody asked what does the coaching work? How does the coaching work in SOM and the CDO? Again, you can just log into the alumni portal And you can make an appointment under your career. There's coaching opportunities, and you log in using your CAS information, your sign-in information. So that's behind the firewall. If you have trouble getting to that, Kayla and my colleagues in alumni relations will help you with that, with those credentials that you need as well. I see one, any specific question, suggestions for USA jobs? I think these are suggestions for all jobs. I'm not sure kind of what that question is specifically, but you know, again, the strategies and the tactics that I suggest here, you know, I've talked to folks all week long from Asia, from Europe, South America, Central America, and the US. And honestly, the tactics are largely the same. The thing I haven't talked about very deeply here is that networking is really helpful in both finding the right opportunities for you, as well as having people walk your resume into the hiring manager, which already creates some intimacy and trust because you're part of an in-group, you're being referred in. So do please think about how are you leveraging your SOM network, your undergraduate alumni network, other organizations that you've been involved with in the past. So those are important. Oh, there's some clarification on the question about USA jobs. Federal employment, federal employment with agencies across the government. It's a pretty challenging job platform to navigate. Again, I would talk to people that are in those roles. There are certain types of jobs, and that's really a good distinction to make here. I'm speaking generally in business. Certain governmental roles expect to see everything you've ever done. Certain roles require a curriculum vitae that requires, again, all of your publications, courses you've taught, things like that, research you've been involved with. So certain roles require certain things. With respect to those types of opportunities, that would be very specific work that we would do to help to make sure that you've actually got what you need in terms of those, to be successful in those application. Again, it goes back to the same ideas. What are they looking for? And am I delivering what they're looking for in the language that they expect? In terms of including only relevant experience, do you think companies will be concerned about then seeing gaps in time within working, between working? Are there strategies for this? Well, I think the high level one is own your gaps. And if you're letting them know that it is relevant experience, and then you have another section maybe below that says other professional experience, the gaps will be attended to there. And sometimes you just give yourself a sabbatical. I know some folks that had actually planned on taking a break at the end of 2019, diving into job search in 2020 into something new. They'd done some personal reflective work, and then something happened that kind of put their job search on hold for a few months as a result of, you know, our fun global pandemic that we've got going on. When I talk to them about what they've been doing this year, it hasn't actually been nothing. So if somebody asks you questions about what might be a gap in your resume, tell them what you did. I was attending to some family issues, or I'd actually been working for a really long time and I gave myself a break. And some of the things that I did, I traveled, I took some courses. And frankly, in this pandemic time, I've talked to a bunch of people who have been grateful for not being inside a particular company or industry, because as they consider what they might like to do next, it's a beautiful opportunity to think a bit more broadly and to be thoughtful about what's happening throughout a supply chain, for example, or which businesses or industries do they think are going to have the greatest opportunities for rebounding and growth in the future. And even thinking about, you know, some of our prior social and economic disruptions, what types of innovation came out of those? And if you have this white space right now, it's a beautiful time to think about what else could we do? What else could be really useful? So own your gaps, don't be embarrassed by your gaps, and be ready to talk about them in a way that might even make somebody a little jealous that they didn't have a gap. hopefully that answers that question. When presenting relevant experience, is there a different value placed on consulting versus in-house work? This is my famous graduate school answer. It depends. It depends on what the company needs, and it depends on how you tell your story. There's different things that you accomplish in consulting. I know I started my career out in public accounting, and I did some consulting later on in my career. Those opportunities were great because I had a lot of exposure to different types of companies, different styles, different management, and that gave me a broader perspective. When I was actually working within companies in-house, I had a much deeper responsibility and deeper relationships with folks over a longer period of time. So I think both are important, and it depends on what specifically the current role requires. And it's really about thinking about how do you want to tell the story in a way that inspires someone's confidence in your ability to create value in their organization. Somebody's asking, am I available for coaching for alumni from other schools? Unfortunately, I work for SOM. I do post things on LinkedIn. You're welcome to kind of follow me there and see what types of things I put out there, and hopefully that's helpful to you. And again, you are available to go back and look at some of the other webinars that are available, many of which are open to everyone on the Yale School of Management YouTube channel. So hopefully that helps. And I'd encourage you, there's lots of schools that have great opportunities here, or great career development organizations and alumni relations organizations that could be helpful also. So please don't just stop here at SOM. Think about your undergraduate institutions or other institutions as well that could help. I know I love talking to my colleagues from other schools, and we share ideas back and forth all the time. So there's other really great people out there too. Should we limit our LinkedIn profile to 10 years of professional history too? I don't think so. And here's why. You might not want as much detail in around all of those things. LinkedIn is a great place to connect with people. So if you don't have your undergraduate institution there, or if you don't have your first job out of college, my first job out of college was Deloitte. I'm connected with people that I worked with before the internet existed in the way that it works today. So if you don't have those experiences there, you can't reconnect with people and see these different ways that we are part of the same group. So I would be thoughtful about that and really looking at it though and saying, is this sharing my brand in a way that supports where I'm going to go in the future? And how do you actually claim value for all of those things that you did earlier and how they set you up for where you are now? And this place that you are now, hopefully, is a place that's going to set you up really well to move into the job that we're talking about in the resume that you've just tailored. Let's see, what else do we have here? What resume tips do you have for older workers who have greater difficulties getting interviews? Peek at the webinar that we did last month. We talked about setting up for success in your third. Also, a year ago, I did a webinar with Mark Friedman. There's lots of information about how do we actually work and find opportunities as older employees. I know I have my AARP card and I've got my fair share of silvers. We have a lot to offer. And it's a matter of knowing that we have a lot to offer and presenting ourselves in ways that people want to talk to us. And sometimes if you just send your resume in and they're looking, oh, well, this is an older person, it might not work as well. Biggest tip I have is to really be thoughtful about what that organization is looking for and network your way in. You may not start with an application. You might start with a couple of conversations where they get to know you. And I'll tell you what, once people know you and care about you, they're going to do a lot more in terms of helping you to get those opportunities in terms of interviews in the future as well. So please don't start with this idea that I can't, I'm older, they won't, because we get what we focus on. And that mindset is so important to being successful in this process. If you don't believe in you, they won't believe in you. Hopefully that helps. Please comment on the length of a resume. It's a rule, 1 page for 10 years, thereabouts. I'd say that that's probably good. If you're a younger employee and we're speaking about relevant experience, you really want to be thoughtful about what you put on there that the interviewer is going to peek at and be drawn to. If you're an older employee, you can flip over into your 2 pages. Sometimes it's, kind of your experiences on the front page, and you might kick your other information or your education to the second page. But generally you don't want to include too much because, again, it's a step in a process, and the resume, the intro kind of email might be to get them to, want to read your resume. Your resume is to get them to want to have a conversation with you, and your conversation with them is to get them to want to further the interview process. So you don't want to give them too much too fast, because again, if it's too much, and we talked about that, there's just too much information here, they're not going to take the time to thoughtfully go through it all anyway. And it's not all going to be so relevant to them as if you tailored it more thoughtfully. I know we're getting close to time to wrap up. Let me just see if I can finish. There's 2 more questions, I think, here. I had a coach suggest an alternatively formatted resume for career pivots that organizes skills instead of roles to show the transferability. Is this valuable, or would you instead suggest a summary statement? It's a point of view. I think the summary statement is really helpful. It takes a long time to kind of get the language right. When you do, it helps people to have context to read the rest. And then the bullet points that you would share would highlight those skills that you used in very different ways. Just like I talked about, kind of your ingredients in baking cakes or cookies or breads. We're just combining them in different ways to yield different results. So that translation and that story you really need to own. Putting a whole big list of skills isn't going to translate into, can this person deliver these outcomes that I need? That still would take a teeny bit more work for somebody to figure out and decide or discern that you really are worth the risk. So I do a little bit more and try to keep a more traditional resume, because again, if things aren't where they expect they're going to be, they might get frustrated and put your resume to the side and go to the next one and see which one am I actually really excited by. So hopefully that answers there. And are there particular resources suggesting for translating career not-for-profit to for-profit? A lot of people moving from one to the other, less from for-profit, less from nonprofit to for-profit. Again, it depends on what the role requires. And I think even in not-for-profits, there's a lot of the same skills. So if you think about what's required in terms of outcomes that you would be delivering, how you as a leader would be getting results through other people, even in some cases, I know some not-for-profits are in a space of working with volunteers. So influence and ability to get results through people who don't directly report for you. There's a lot of different things that we can focus on to highlight. Again, if you want to have a deeper conversation about this, we can do this more in a one-on-one. It really is, though, about saying, if I were putting myself in their shoes, what are they looking for? What would be, kind of tolerable risks? And what are things that I really need to, kind of hit home so that they feel comfortable having a further conversation with me? And let me see, there's just one last question. For a new graduate that's not been working, do you lead with the experience or the education section? Again, I'd say it depends. If you are, if you've not been working since you graduated in the springtime, then I'd say probably you want to kind of lead there. Though there's a gap and we need to talk about what you've been doing during that gap, maybe what further classes you've taken, what types of internship or volunteer opportunities have you taken on. So it really is a function of what's going to make it easy for them to say yes to you. If you've been doing some things that are relevant and you've been taking on some responsibilities that have filled in gaps that help you to be more palatable, more aligned with what that organization might need because you needed some specific experience, then I would lead with the experience. And note that you are still, and they'll see in your resume that you're a younger hire, though, that you have been resourceful and thoughtful about how you've used this time in this very, very difficult time. So, and the last thing I'd say is please don't feel badly if you've been in a search for a little while. This is a challenging time. And I've seen some really funny career services memes that said, you know, somebody's looking at a resume and said, what have you been doing? And what did you do in 2020? There's a gap in your resume. And the response was, I was washing my hands, right? If you remind people that you were in the midst of a global pandemic and you actually took the time both to thoughtfully consider what you'd like to do next in your career and to spend important time with family or to train for a marathon or to do whatever it is that you were doing, that's your story. And the most important thing is that you own it and you feel good about it, because it's going to make it easier for other people to feel good about you if that's the energy that you're bringing to the conversation. So that's it. We're kind of at the top of the hour. I think I've gotten through all of the questions. There is no maximum number of pages for an effective resume. Again, it goes back to it depends. You want the least number of pages you can use to get the result that you want, which is the further meeting. So again, it's tailored for the opportunity. And Kayla, did I miss anything, or do you think we've got it all?
I think you got it all.
All right. That was a little bit longer than an hour. I apologize for the blip in the middle. And I am going to be calling IT and figuring out what I can do with this computer. So thanks everybody for being here. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you on our webinar next month. And I also look forward to seeing some of you in coaching appointments soon. Have a wonderful day. And I'm cheering you on. Good things ahead.